Welcome to Docket Unsealed, where we uncover the cases that continue to raise questions long after the headlines have faded. From unexplained disappearances and shocking murders to investigations filled with hidden details, we examine the evidence, the timeline, and the people at the center of each case. Some stories are difficult to hear, some remain unsolved, and others reveal how a single overlooked detail can change everything. Tonight, we're taking a closer look at one of those cases. So, let's begin. Today, the story of a man enjoying his passion for fishing on the Thames in southwest London, who never came home from his final trip. Scott Wilkinson suffered a horrific death after being violently attacked in a beautiful spot that he loved and had visited many times. Scott was 48 years old and had driven lorries for a living until a medical condition meant he could no longer continue in that career. His new circumstances gave him more time to enjoy the true passion of his life, which was fishing. He had always loved the pastime and was passing that love on to his sons, with whom he enjoyed numerous extended fishing trips. On the 25th of July 2016, Scott headed off to camp at one of his favorite fishing spots for a few days. He took his tent and fishing rods to a place called Docket Island, close to Sunbury Lock in southwest London. He had spent many times there before and enjoyed the peace and tranquility of the location. While he was there, his partner Lisa and other friends would visit him, bringing food and other supplies he needed to remain at the campsite. On Thursday, the 28th of July, Scott's friend David Price headed to Docket Island with a replacement gas canister that he had promised to bring. But when David arrived, Scott wasn't in his tent or anywhere nearby. There was blood on the tent, and Scott's bait box and one of his fishing rods were in the water. David immediately realized that something was seriously wrong. After unsuccessfully searching for Scott, he called the police. Shortly after 4 p.m. that afternoon, Scott's body was found floating in the water, not far from his tent. A pathologist later determined that Scott had died from brain trauma caused by a blunt force head injury. Detectives believed the injury was probably inflicted with a wooden plank. He had also suffered numerous other injuries, including broken ribs and a ruptured spleen. Scott had clearly been subjected to a savage attack. Remarkably, he remained alive but unconscious for more than 3 hours afterward. His injuries were so severe that investigators believed even immediate medical attention would probably not have saved his life. Scott's partner Lisa had visited him the day before the attack. He had appeared perfectly well when he walked her back to her car at around 10:45 p.m., in good spirits. Scott told Lisa that he would call her at 11:30 to make sure she had arrived home safely, but he never made that call. When Lisa tried to contact him, his phone went to voicemail. She wasn't immediately concerned because it was late, and she assumed that he had fallen asleep. Detectives examined CCTV footage covering the only path on and off the island. There was no vehicle access to Docket Island, and the footage confirmed that Lisa had left the island with Scott at 10:48 p.m. Because of Scott's health problems, he wore a heart monitor. At 11:18 p.m., the monitor recorded a massive spike, strongly suggesting that this was the moment Scott was attacked. The timing also matched the account of a nearby witness who told police that, at around the same time, he heard several male voices shouting for approximately 15 seconds. He described it as sounding like complete chaos. Just minutes later, at 11:22 p.m., 3 men were captured on CCTV leaving the island. Police quickly established that nobody else had been on Docket Island at the time. It appeared that the 3 men seen on camera were responsible for the attack. The question was who they were and why they had attacked Scott. On the night of the attack, just over 2 miles away in Grovelands Park in West Molesey, a group of teenagers had gathered around midnight. 3 other young men approached them, with one asking for a cigarette. When the request was refused, one of the men laughed and told the group that they had just killed someone. He then casually remained with the teenagers as though nothing unusual had happened. One of the teenagers recognized one of the men and later told police that he believed they were serious and simply didn't care about what they had done. The 3 men were Lenny Kraj, his brother Shane Kraj, and their cousin Charlie Smith. Lenny was only 16 and had experienced a difficult childhood. He had been brought up in care along with his 6 brothers and sisters and already had a child of his own, having become a father at just 15. He was at Docket Island with the other 2 men and had recently run away from a children's home in Blackpool. He was avoiding the authorities, who he knew would be looking for him. His older brother Shane was 18 and had left care, returning to live with his mother nearby. Like Lenny, he had a previous conviction for battery, although he had no other major convictions. Local authority records also contained concerns about the influence he had over his younger brother. Their 1-year-old cousin Charlie was also a young father, and was described by people who knew him as having a distant relationship with the truth. He had a history of violence, including threats, criminal damage, and possession of a knife, and had received a 2-year suspended sentence in 2014 after pleading guilty to robbery. The day after the murder, police went to Lenny's mother's home to take him back to the children's home. He was there, as was his brother, but there was no immediate evidence connecting him to what had happened at Donkey Island. Lenny was returned to Blackpool. Later that same day, Charlie and Shane met 2 female friends. Shane told the girls that he had killed someone the previous night by repeatedly hitting him with a plank of wood. They initially didn't believe him, assuming he was making it up. But Charlie confirmed that he had also been there, and that the murder had really happened. It was also believed that Shane told his own parents that he was responsible for the murder. The 2 brothers later tried to return to Donkey Island, apparently in an attempt to remove evidence that could link them to the killing, including their tent, fishing rods, and DNA. DNA from all 3 men was eventually found on drink cans, hands, and cigarettes at the scene. Police officers were still working around the area collecting evidence, preventing the men from gaining access. Within days, all 3 were arrested and taken into custody. But there wasn't initially enough concrete evidence to charge them, so they were released. After their release, the 3 men appeared to believe that they had escaped responsibility for the murder. But more confessions followed over the coming months, with all 3 men telling other people about what had happened. Scott's friend David Price and his partner Lisa were particularly shocked because they had seen the 3 men while they were camping, only meters away from Scott. The men had appeared to be getting along with him. Lisa had even spoken casually with them on the night of Scott's murder, asking their ages and making conversation. Nothing about them had caused her to suspect that they were capable of hurting Scott. Investigators considered 2 main theories for the motive. Scott sometimes sold small amounts of cannabis while fishing, and he had sold some to the 3 young men. Police considered whether they had attacked him after he refused to give them more drugs or refused to provide something for free. Another possibility involved an incident the previous day when the 3 men had returned to Donkey Island after seeing a friend and discovered that their fishing equipment had been hidden. They found the equipment, but investigators considered whether they had blamed Scott for hiding it and attacked him as an act of revenge. Police were convinced that the 3 men were responsible. They had the confessions, CCTV evidence, and forensic evidence placing the men at the campsite. However, it took almost 2 years for the case to be built sufficiently for the 3 men to be rearrested. During their interviews, all 3 responded with no comment, but they were eventually charged with murder. During the trial, the behavior of the 3 defendants was described as appalling. They were seen smirking throughout the proceedings, and at one point, the judge had to tell them to take the case seriously. Their behavior showed little apparent remorse or respect for Scott's parents, family, or friends who were present in court. Once they were in the dock, the 3 men turned on each other. Charlie Smith claimed that the group had been buying cannabis from Scott when Shane Kraj suddenly attacked him with a piece of wood while Lenny had a knife. Smith told the jury that Scott had been murdered in cold blood and argued that the men should accept responsibility rather than force everyone through the trial. When asked why he hadn't told the truth earlier, he said he had been afraid of the Kraj brothers and what might happen to him and his family. Shane Kraj gave a different version. He claimed that he had argued with Scott over cannabis that Scott had sold him. According to Shane, Scott became aggressive over payment and pulled out a knife. Shane said that his cousin Smith then struck Scott with a pole-shaped object. Lenny, meanwhile, maintained that he didn't know what had happened. His barrister told the jury that Lenny had been standing by the tent and hadn't witnessed the violence. Lenny did not give evidence himself, with his barrister arguing that the prosecution had failed to present a case that required an answer. After 2 days of deliberations, the jury returned its verdicts. Charlie Smith was found guilty of manslaughter, while the 2 Kraj brothers were found guilty of murder. The judge told them that this had not been a senseless or motiveless crime. He said it was clear that the 3 men had discussed how the attack would be carried out, had waited until it was dark, waited until Scott's partner Lisa had left the island, and armed themselves with a weapon. Both Kraj brothers were sentenced to 15 years in prison before becoming eligible for parole, while Smith was sentenced to 13 years. None of the three showed any reaction as they were taken to the cells. The apparent smiles and mocking behavior that had characterized parts of the trial had finally stopped. Scott was remembered by his family as a gentle soul with many interests, including restoring cars, but his real passion was fishing. His family described fishing as a hobby that brought everyone together and created shared experiences during summer holidays and adventurous trips to islands, along with the stories of the one that got away. The energy and enthusiasm Scott brought to fishing reflected the way he treated people. He offered friendship, kindness, and closeness to those who wanted or needed it. The story had another tragic ending. Just a year after the court case, Lenny Kraj, then 19, and serving his sentence at HMP Aylesbury, a young offenders institution in Buckinghamshire, was found dead in his cell on the morning of May 16th. He had taken his own life. His brother Shane had reportedly been concerned about Lenny even before his second arrest, telling their mother that he was worried about him and wanted to do his best to get him out. In the end, many lives were destroyed by the violence on Donkey Island. Scott's family never suggested that he was perfect, because none of us are, but they were clear that he did not deserve what happened to him that night. The case also left behind difficult questions about the young men involved and the circumstances that brought them to such a violent act. Whatever their backgrounds or motives, the consequences were devastating, leaving Scott's family without him and permanently changing the lives of everyone connected to the case. And that brings us to the end of this case here on Docket Unsealed. The evidence may have provided answers, but the story also leaves behind questions that can stay with us long after the investigation is over. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to follow the case with us. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember sometimes the smallest detail can reveal the biggest truth. This is Docket Unsealed.